Hi everyone, thanks for joining me Thursday evening. Last week, I'm sorry, I just forgot about it. I'm in the middle of the quilt show and I do registration and social media advertising, so I'm sorry, I just forgot. But this week, because I'm in the middle of the show, I'm going to talk to you about the quilt show and entering a quilt in a show. I enter my local Quilt Guild's show that they have every year. This is our 27th year of having it. I like to enter art quilts, but there are many categories that you can enter a quilt into. There's pieced quilts, small and big, large bed quilts and small quilts, wall hangings. You can do pieced, applique, mixed techniques, whole quilt, whole cloth quilts, crazy quilts, embroidered quilts, wool quilts. So every show has different categories. The first thing you want to do when you want to enter a show is find a show that you want to enter and then find out what their deadline date is. There'll be a postmark by, and you have to make sure you get it in the mail by that date. Then read their rules. Our rules for our show is that you have to have a 4x6 picture of the front of your quilt. That's all you need for the pictures. Some shows want a front picture, a back picture, and some even want a close-up of the quilting. So for ours, I just did a 4x6 picture of my quilt, and then it says in the rules I needed a hanging sleeve. I don't think there's a quilt show out there that does not want a label, a permanent label on your quilt. So I always try to label my quilts, but make a permanent label for your quilt. And if you don't know how to make a label, I have that on my blog, longarmlove.com. It's on my website. I have a blog and it's on there how to make a quilt label, how I do it. There's YouTube videos on how to do it. You have to have a hanging sleeve. Our show, you can pin your hanging sleeve onto your quilt. Not all shows are like that, but ours you can just pin it on if you want to, or you can whip stitch it on. Just follow all the rules. Just read every detail, make sure that you're following them all. You have to, our show, you have to have a self-addressed stamped envelope. So in my envelope, I had my entry form, my check, my self-addressed stamped envelope, and my picture of my quilt. And once I had that all together, I made sure it was postmarked by the end date. And then you wait and you find out if your quilt was accepted. Some quilts, some shows just accept all the quilts that they get in. Some shows are juried, so they have people look at the quilts, the pictures, and then you're accepted or you're not accepted into the show. So our Quilt Guild's show is pretty easy, and we accept the quilts in until we reach the limit where we don't have room for any more quilts. So then at our show, in that self-addressed stamped envelope, you get that back and you get a ribbon, a participant ribbon that you wear to the show, and you get in free to the show because you were willing to enter quilts into our show. So we give you free admittance to the show. Then you also have a slip where you cut half of it apart, you cut it apart in half. Part of it is pinned on your quilt over top of your label. So the judge cannot see whose quilt it is, and they judge it blind. All they know is the name of the quilt, the category that it's in, and then the number of the quilt. We give each quilt a number, and they judge it by, without your name. So they have no idea whose quilt it is. At judging, what happens at judging is the quilts are stacked in piles, stacks, according to their numbers. So all the 100s in our show, 100s are miniatures. So all the 100s are stacked, and then all the 200s, and they're stacked by categories. Then we have big tables that we put the quilts on. There's tables to the left that hold quilts and tables to the right. And then in front of them are women who sit there with the judging sheets, and they write, we call them scribes, they write down what the judge is saying about the quilt. And then I'm there, and the person in charge of the ribbons and getting the judge, she's there, and we write down all the winners and keep track of the winners, first, second, third place, honorable mentions, and all the special ribbons that are given out, and make sure we have them all correct. And then that's given to the person that does the program, and she puts the sheet in, the winner sheet in the program. So at judging, once we have those tables there, then we'll say, we're going to judge small quilts pieced. The girls will bring those over and lay them on the table, open them all up flat, and stack them one on top of the other. And then they fold back each one, and the judge will look at each one so she can see the whole range in the category. Bed quilts might have 17, 18 quilts in it. So she'll see the tops of each one as they're flipping, so she has an idea of what's in that category. Then each quilt is held up, and the judge stands there and looks at it, stands back and looks at it, and then the ladies are told to lay it back down. Then she goes and she starts looking at the details. She'll look at the overall color, the choice of fabrics. She'll look at cornerstones and sashings and points to make sure that the points match and they're not off center or just, you know, a few stitches off. She'll look at the binding. She'll look at the quilting. I'm looking at my quilt on the wall over there, so I'm thinking, you know, what was said about that quilt. She looks at that the quilting is even throughout the quilt. Like the one that's on my wall, I've had it in 3 shows, and I get the same comment from each judge. Sometimes you don't, but I did on this one. And this quilt is an off-center log cabin quilt in the middle, and then around the edges are piano key border. And I was told on each judge's sheet that the piano key border needed more quilting in. So you want the quilting to be even. You don't want, you know, real tight quilting in the middle of your quilt and then your border have hardly any quilting around it. You want it consistent throughout, not necessarily the same design, but the amount of quilting consistent. This quilt right behind me is the very first quilt I ever made, and I entered it in a show. And one of the reasons I like to enter it in a show is because when the judge is looking at the quilt and judging it, no one else is going to see that sheet. You get it back in an envelope at the end of the show when you pick up your quilt. So the only people that know what the judge says are the people that are there at judging, which there's about 15 people at our guild, 15 to 20 people there at judging. We have the people holding up, taking turns holding quilts up, people taking turns writing down the information. So we have about 15 to 20, but that's the only people that know what was said. And believe me, after you go through 105 quilts, you don't remember what was said with each quilt. You don't. So you get the information back written down. She will tell you what you did really, really well. She'll tell you, you know, like perfect piecing, or she'll say border color choices were, you know, great for this quilt, or binding should be, you know, binding is excellent. 45 degree corners on your binding, excellent, or good, or fair. She'll have, you know, comments, but then they'll tell you what to strive for. They do not say, oh, you shouldn't have done this way, or it should have been this way. They don't do that. They'll say, maybe should have been in a different category. Sometimes people put their quilt in the wrong category. It might, like if it's a wall hanging and it's your original work, you put it in wall hanging, but maybe it would have done better in an art quilt category. Sometimes they'll say comments like that. Sometimes they'll say, strive when stitching in the ditch to stay in the ditch. That's one of the comments I hear about custom quilting, and where the 2 seams come together, that you need to keep that stitching line right in that ditch in the middle. You shouldn't be able to see it. That's one of the comments I hear pretty often. Keep your borders straight. Sometimes they're a little wavy. Just comments like that, but it's things for you to strive for. And once you realize, you know, where you need to improve, then you can hunt for information to learn how to improve that. Asking other quilting friends, going to quilting classes, watching YouTube videos, taking online classes. And you can find out how to improve your quilting and how to improve your piecing. There's various ways, and some techniques work for some people and some techniques work for others. Myself, and it's funny because some people love to quilt and hate to piece. Some people love to piece and hate to quilt, and some people love to do it all. I enjoy art quilts because it is a release to me. I can quilt, I can design what I want to make, and I can pull fabrics, and it's like a big color palette that I can just draw and applique or couch or whatever. But my girlfriend, she loves to piece, and she did not like quilting. So that's what long armors are out there for. If you love to piece your quilt tops, then I can quilt them for you. And you can, you know, bring them to me. I do edge-to-edge quilting, and I have hundreds of designs. So, and there's other quilters out there. I do not do custom work. It's kind of hard right now to find someone to do custom work. They are out there, and you can, you know, find a quilter, and you can go ahead and piece. And I love the quilting part. That part's fun to me. So I love quilting your quilts. And we have category. You don't have to make the whole quilt. You can piece the top, take it to a long armor, and enter it in a show. You can do that. But we also, in our show, we have a category for solo person. That means that person was the only person that touched that quilt. They picked out the fabric, they cut the fabric, they pieced the fabric, they appliqued the fabric, whatever it is, the technique. They quilted it, they put the binding on it, the hanging sleeve, no one else touched it. And we have a ribbon for that, and it's solo person. And they pull all the quilts that are, you know, made by one person, and the judge looks at that for the best quilt in one person making the whole quilt. But some shows don't have that. We have that at our show. So you have to look at the categories when you're filling out your form. But it's really a lot of fun, and you learn a lot from it. And I also recommend that you join a quilt guild. Quilt guilds, even if you don't make all the meetings, you can pick and choose what meetings you want to go to. Most guilds are very minimum fee to join, $20, $25, $30, somewhere in there for the year. There's workshops, there's sewing groups, there's lectures, there's Zoom talks now through guilds, there's Zoom workshops through guilds. So it's a great community to learn in. So if you want to learn to improve your piecing and your quilting, one of the things I would recommend is join a guild. And there's lots that go on in guilds. Ours is a very active guild, so we're happy to have you come and join us if you would like to. But that's my talk for tonight. I'm kind of tired, and I have 2 more days of the show, but I love seeing everybody there and seeing all my quilting friends, because I have quilting friends in all the different guilds throughout our community and through Pittsburgh, and all the quilt shops and all the ladies that work at the quilt shops. And I've met a lot of people through quilting, and it's just a great group of people. So I hope I see you at the show. And if you don't know who I am, well, I guess you would recognize me, but I wouldn't necessarily recognize you. But come up and say hi. Come up and say hi to me. I would like that. So I'm going to sign off for now, and I'll see you next Thursday after the show. And I got to think of what I want to talk to you about. If you have any suggestions, let me know. Bye.